the first Incredibles film was released in 2004, there was not much else around it, and viewership, speculation, and fan reception had it that all sorts of theories and speculation and ideas about the Incredibles universe. With the Incredibles films not exactly set within a comic book universe, just inspired about it and borrowing themes from it as well, we can now discuss and theorize more of the circumstances and situations relating to it. The Incredibles, 2004. Superpowers and the mutant connection. How a person obtains their powers or abilities isn't necessarily mentioned during the film. During a discussion at dinner, Dash mentions to Helen that Jack didn't have any powers and was ordinary, with Robert being a little disappointed with this possibility. Violet mentions that he's lucky for not exactly or necessarily having powers, and Robert says that there's nothing to be afraid of with the fact that Dash and Violet do have powers. He actually encourages it with Dash, but Helen is more neutral or critical on the concept. Though at the end of the film it's revealed that Jack has his own sense of powers and that superpowers can be inherited from parents. This is similar to Marvel's Uncanny X-Men, where superheroes can develop during childhood or puberty, as Violet had problems first using her powers in the film, though Dash had no real problems or difficulty controlling his speed. Actually, the upper limits of speed were never fully measured in the film. However, in comics, superpowers can be gained through nearly infinite situations or circumstances, but since the only documented example of powers being inherited is with Robert and Helen's children, the only example of superpowers being gained through technology is Syndrome and his gadgets. Though online speculation had it at the time that Gazer Beam's visor was the source of his powers, but nothing was ever confirmed of this. The Superhero Registration Act and Relocation Program. During the first film, it's mentioned that the film takes place sometime shortly after the Second World War, and the fact that heroes and heroines were quite active during and right through the war, only ending shortly after. It's not necessarily confirmed that superheroes were active before the war in America, but online speculation mentions that it would need to be in order for the heroes and heroines to have enough of a trusted reputation in their careers for nationwide praise and to be recognized almost instantly by the general public when seen. When Mr. Incredible infiltrated Syndrome's island computer database network, there were some detailed files on many of the various heroes and heroines. This is commented on by some as being proof that heroes of some form, in some method, existed and were active prior to the war. During the film, it's mentioned that there were some sort of proposals or implementation of a superhero registration policy by the American government to rein in the number of active superheroes throughout the country. What's interesting is that in DC Comics, there were also examples of superhero registration acts, and a number of the heroes did not necessarily want to comply with the government's policy of registration and regulation, and a number of the Golden Age heroes went into retirement as a result of this. Only a decent amount of time later did the comics revamp and the Silver Age began, with a number of heroes and heroines returning, but as a result of time passing, a good amount stayed retired after the war. After Robert has an incident with his boss at work, he is escorted from the scene by Rick, that explains the situation of the superhero relocation program. It's been said that this is a logical approach to superheroes who didn't exactly want to or could necessarily just disappear from public life. Though the comics of any sort didn't really have something equivalent to this, it's theorized that this would essentially be the same thing written for comics. Apparently, after the war, it's hypothesized that the government set up an agency that helps heroes and heroines readjust for civilian life. Basically, examples with the Incredibles fit into this, such as accidents with the superheroes using their powers or abilities to help one another or people, and the program helping the heroes and heroines with living expenses and even job assistance. Similar to veterans and how the government helps them to readjust to normal situations and circumstances, basically going back to a civilian life. Vigilantism. Robert and Lucius mention to Helen and the kids that they're going out bowling, when in fact they listen in on police radio to hear crimes in progress. It's mentioned during their conversation that other heroes have had similar problems readjusting to normal life, without the lack of excitement or thrills that being a hero can possibly give. It's easy to imagine at one time after the war, and once the anti-superhero feeling swept the country, there were a lot more doing such vigilante actions, and it's hinted at that both of them might have been doing such a thing for years. Kronos and advanced idea mechanics. After Robert has his outburst at work, he loses his job but is hesitant to mention this fact to Helen. However, he gets an encrypted message in the mail from Mirage. She informs him that she's employed by a mysterious benefactor that wants to use him to help test out a new weapon. It's later found out that during the first confrontation with Syndrome that he's Buddy, a fan of Mr. Incredible who was traumatized by not wanting him as a sidekick. Kronos is his organization that he's created single-handedly by selling technology to foreign governments and shady organizations with the profits he earned from these dealings. This is similar to the offshoot of Hydra being AIM, where they use technology to attempt to gain world domination. Syndrome's headquarters is an uncharted island or possibly bought in private island in the South Pacific. And Mr. Incredible unknowingly plays a plot in making Syndrome's robot a more powerful killing machine, as it is literally that, a killing machine, the robot. It's hinted and referred to that Robert wasn't the first hero that Syndrome paid to test his robot in combat. During the montage scene where Mr. Incredible checks the data files on the various heroes and heroines, and discovers that the robot has had systematically killed heroes and heroines and having been destroyed by them as well, progressively getting better at the process and concept of killing and becoming a more lethal killing machine. An interesting theory is that Syndrome took advantage of some of the heroes down on their luck after the war possibly, and knowing that they need income to survive, invited them to his island and tested them against the robot, with the robot eventually killing them all during the process. Mr. Incredible apparently wasn't the first to discover the truth behind Kronos, as Gazer Beam used his optic blast to carve the password to access Syndrome's data system being Kronos, but perhaps dying from his wounds inflicted while trying to escape a confrontation with the robot. As Mr. Incredible said to Syndrome, "You're not a hero, so you killed real heroes." As Syndrome scoffs and actually agrees with the comment that Mr. Incredible said, this said comment refers to why no other heroes are seen in the film besides Frozone, and why some heroes and heroines simply disappeared and were never seen or heard from again. They were killed on this private island testing Kronos' roboting battle abilities. One major point of discussion is, why did Syndrome ask Mr. Incredible to test the robot right when it was near completion? Why not ask him to test it during an earlier stage in the robot's development? Some say it was because Syndrome knew that Mr. Incredible was one of the stronger heroes and he would have easily defeated the robot and possibly found out Syndrome's evil plans. Others say that he wanted to wait for the right time to invite Mr. Incredible to his island to have the robot kill him. Even theories that Syndrome just wanted to systematically kill all heroes and Mr. Incredible just happened to be a later choice of his. Mr. Incredible is a very powerful hero. During the scene where Robert gets back into shape for fighting the robot, Helen and the phone call she gets later on while with Edna mentions that he lost his job for basically 2 months. And during all of this time, he's been fighting and destroying robots systematically built by Syndrome for the process of the robot becoming more deadly. No capes. After Robert accepts the offer to work for Syndrome, he tears his old supersuit during a confrontation with the Kronos robot. He takes it to Edna for it to be repaired. Eventually, agreeing to his request, Robert makes a casual comment about desiring a cape with his new uniform. She quickly mentions heroes and heroines who have been killed in accidents because of their capes, and is a key aspect of the film with relation to superhero costumes. The idea is actually very interesting because it's been theorized and assumed that superhero capes with their costumes can actually cause problems for the wearer because they can get in the way, get tangled in on things, and from things. As well as from an aerodynamic point of view, it's actually a liability for the said hero or heroine when they wear a cape as part of their costume. It's also an ironic, dark humor fact that Syndrome is killed when his cape is caught in his jet's turbine engine at the end of the first film. Did Mirage have feelings for Mr. Incredible? This is a question that viewers of the film have argued about for years, and you either agree with it or disagree with it. For the terms of discussion and debate, we will go with the side that says yes, Mirage did develop some feelings for Robert. It's quite natural, really, with Robert being on the island for that amount of time, unknowingly helping Syndrome refine and develop his robot. He might have had constant contact with Mirage, and she might have come to like him. When she helped to release him from Syndrome's anti-gravity restraints, and when she helped to send Robert and his family back to America within another rocket. And the final claim of when he hugged her, she enjoyed his embrace. There might have been something there, and chances are, according to the information presented, it might be true. The Incredibles 2, 2018. Superpowers and the Mutant Connection, Volume 2. Due to events during the end of the first film, it's revealed that Jack-Jack has powers. But the family does not become aware of this until the sequel. Oftentimes with mutants in the Marvel Universe, they manifest during childhood or adolescence. Jack-Jack's powers emerged during his infancy may or may not be normal, as it's not mentioned how Dash and Violet obtained their powers, or even how Robert and Helen's powers as well for an even wider discussion. It might be of an elaboration of what people theorize after seeing the first film, but even after all this time, the second film does not necessarily answer these questions. The Superhero Registration Act of Relocation Program Volume 2. Expounding further on what was established during the first film, Rick mentions that due to another public sighting by the Paw family, that the government stopped the relocation program. As a result, Robert and Helen thank Rick for all that they've done for him. So naturally, aspects of the act of relocation were funded by the American government to help superheroes and their loved ones. Funding can be withdrawn or theoretically increased depending on the situation or public opinion. The next generation of superheroes. As a result of Elastigirl's exploits and Winston's encouragement and support, superheroes are officially legalized again. But due to the war and possibly Syndrome's Chronos robot, many of the previous heroes are either dead or not necessarily willing to re-emerge out of the shadows to help people once more. But there are some exceptions, possibly with Reflux, who is an elderly hero who might have been fighting crime during the war. Void's respect and awe of Helen has had some to speculate that as a child she might have seen her exploits of heroism. Then, as time passed, she became old enough to use her powers to help make a difference, being inspired by Elastigirl. What years does the Incredible films take place in? Though the year in which the Incredibles universe takes place in is not specifically referred to in the first film, comments and information seen and mentioned in the sequel gave a rough idea of the time or year exactly when it takes place. Winston mentioned that superheroes have been legally bound for a little more than 15 years. And if we use the end of the Second World War, which is 1945, that would make the year at least 1960. During a scene with Robert and Dash, he's actually watching an episode of Johnny Quest on television. This was a groundbreaking animated series that existed for a single season which ran from 1964 to 1965. If we also use the mentioning on the television of the original Outer Limits show, this was also a television show that aired from 1963 to 1965. So if we combine the speech that Winston made with Johnny Quest and Outer Limits air dates, then the time that The Incredibles is set in the sequel 4 is roughly 1964 to 1965. We would also have to estimate that both shows are being aired for the first time or early after the original air dates. So both television shows with the speech mentioned can technically possibly be only those 2 years. Modern ideology relating to superheroes. The major theme of the second film is the ideological divide between Winston, whom supports having heroes and heroines legalized once more, and believes that by having heroes in everyday life would help regular people when they need assistance. This is contradicted by Sister Evelyn, who supports that heroes and heroines can be fine in their actions, but they can't or won't always be there when people need help. She believes that heroes can't fix every problem or prevent every crime that might occur, or be around at any literal moment to offer assistance when needed. The ideological struggle of the film has supporters and detractors of both sides, if you support heroes or not, depending on the situation. In Golden and Silver Age comics of DC and Marvel, heroes and heroines used to be around literally whenever needed, and they were miracle workers. In Bronze and Modern Age comics, this isn't true and mistakes happen, sometimes tragic ones. Such as when Winston and Evelyn's father are killed during a home invasion and no hero or heroine was able to come to their aid. This is what causes her to become the screenslaver with her technology. One of the last comments she says to the Incredibles after her capture proved her point efficiently. Just because she's captured, her plan stopped doesn't mean that her way of thinking is wrong. She is right regardless of her apprehension. Online discussion have people agreeing with her point of view, as others agree with Winston that heroes can, have, and do make differences in people's lives. But others also counter the argument that in modern times, people can't do everything, even superheroes. Modern life is so complex that there will be unavoidable moments where people can't be helped. An interesting example is during the first film when Robert's boss is lecturing him on the company, a person is assaulted in an alleyway and Robert is unable to help. He knows what's happening but can't do anything. It's an ironic foreshadowing of the main plot of the second film.